everyone. My name's Todd. Welcome back to the Laundry List. I'm your host. We're here in October in Old Town Scottsdale. And boy, the weather is just beautiful out there. We can finally open our doors and windows and enjoy the morning and night air here. Of course, lately it's been, I don't know if you've noticed, Charles, but like there is a smoke in the air.
Yes.
And I heard it's because the tribe's burning it's their weekly burn.
Correct. I was trying to pinpoint where that was because I came out of my place and smelt it. And then as I was driving to work, I'm like, where is this coming from? Because the streets were coated in a fog.
Yeah.
And then I was able to see it was coming from the reservation, which is just east of us.
Yeah, they do. I think they do a burn once every 6 months, and this is their week. But anyway, we're really glad to be here. We got a very special guest and someone I've known for 20 plus years. I identify with him, and like I always share in AA meetings and 12-step meetings, you know, it's that's what keeps me coming back to the meetings is that I identify and really share and feel what they're feeling and sharing. And my whole life, I've had people tell me what to do, but I've never like had that identification that I have in going to meetings and sharing and hearing someone's story. So I'm super, super grateful to have my friend Donny on today. But before we introduce Donny, I'm going to have Charles read the laundry list, which are the traits that we used as children to really survive our childhood. And we sometimes use them as adults, which may not serve us and realizing our higher self. So, Charles, if you be so kind to read the laundry list and then the promises, which is what we get when we do the work.
Yep.
So, Charles.
So this is what we had or may have. And number one is we became isolated and afraid of people and authority figures. Number two, we became approval seekers and lost our identity in the process. Number three, we are frightened by angry people and any personal criticism. Number four, we either became alcoholics, marry them, or both. In my case, it was both.
Yeah.
Or find another compulsive personality such as a workaholic to fulfill our sick abandonment needs. Number five, we live life from the viewpoint of victims, and we are attracted by that weakness in our love and friendship relationships. Number six, we have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, and it's easier for us to be concerned with others rather than ourselves. And this enables us to not look too closely at our own faults. Number seven, we get guilt feelings when we stand up for ourselves. Number eight, we became addicted to excitement. Number nine, we confuse love and pity and tend to love people we can pity and ultimately rescue. Number 10, we have stuffed our feelings from our traumatic childhoods and have lost the ability to feel or express our feelings because it hurts so much. And this is also known as denial. Number 11, we judge ourselves harshly and we have a very low sense of self-esteem. Number 12, we are dependent personalities who are terrified of abandonment, and we will do anything to hold on to a relationship in order not to experience those painful abandonment feelings. And we often receive those from living with sick people who were never there emotionally for us. 13, alcoholism is a family disease, and we became para-alcoholics or took on the characteristics of that disease, even though we never picked up a drink. And finally, para-alcoholics, also known as codependents, are reactors rather than actors, Tony A. So that's what we had, Todd.
Okay.
Do you want to know what we can get?
Please tell me.
This is what we can get. One is discover our real identities by loving and accepting ourselves. 2, our self-esteem will increase and we will give ourselves approval on a daily basis. Number 3, fear of authority figures and the need to people please will leave us. 4, our ability to share intimacy will grow inside of us. 5, as we face our abandonment issues, we will be attracted by strengths and become more tolerant of weakness. Number 6, we will enjoy feeling stable, peaceful, and financially secure. 7, we will learn how to play and have fun in our lives. I think that was God dinging. It's time to go play, time to have fun.
Enjoy yourself.
Enjoy ourselves. Number 8, we will choose to love people who can love and be responsible for themselves. 9, healthy boundaries and limits will become easier for us to set. 10, fears of failure and success will leave us, and we'll intuitively make healthier choices. 11, with the help of our ACA support group, which is us and you, our listeners, we will slowly release our dysfunctional behavior. And finally, gradually, with our higher power's help, we will learn to expect the best and get it.
Excellent stuff. Charles, thank you. Yeah, I love hearing that, and I hear it often. Heard it last night, heard it again today, because it's just such a reminder how I can fall back in old patterns of the laundry list. But when I stop, breathe, meditate, talk to God, write a gratitude list, ask God for help, it's amazing how the promises just start coming true. And I find my boundaries and my comfort. But I'd like to introduce our guest. His name's Donny Starkins. He has a podcast called Comeback Stories. And you can find your podcast everywhere, right, Donny?
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Everywhere. How long you been doing the podcast?
We're going on, it'll be about 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
2.5 years. I don't know how many episodes. I think there's got to be 100 in there. 2.5 years, pretty steady. We've had a couple little stops in the podcast where it can get a little complicated working with Darren if he has an agency, a marketing agency, and he switches his agent. Sometimes that switches like the partners that we have for the podcast. So there's been a little bit of that in the last couple of years with him. So it's kind of, we've had these little breaks, but we've been cranking pretty good, having everybody just share their comeback stories. We always thought like first of all, everybody has one and everybody loves one. So it felt like the perfect name. And really when we started the podcast, our mission was just to reach as many people as possible and carry the message and share with them that they're not alone, especially when maybe people might look at an NFL athlete or I'm trying to think of guests we've had, like a Michael Phelps, the greatest Olympian of all time, and just think that like they don't have shit. And Michael Phelps said it best at the beginning of our podcast with him. He just said, we're all the same. We all have pain and we're all just trying to find freedom from that pain. And I think about the pain that I had and how I used to find freedom. It's just a completely different place. As you guys were reading through the promises, it was just, I'm walking through my life and just seeing how it was and the contrast and hearing those promises and just kind of walking through my life in those aspects. And I mean, there's no way I could have ever tried to do this thing alone. I mean, I tried, right? But like the power of fellowship and like-minded individuals coming together that I could relate to when I first got sober was just so important. And both of you guys were two of those guys where it's like, wow, well, they're having success still. They're not like the alcoholic that I envisioned coming off the street. And that relatability was still is such a game changer for me today.
So talk about that, because I know you played competitive sports and we have a lot of people on here that played competitive sports. So talk about how fear entered your life at a young age and how it sort of ran your life. And then when you found drugs and alcohol, how that played out. And then finally, when you got sober and how that worked, because I'd like to hear a little bit about the story and how maybe the laundry list traits and the fear kind of you lived in those as a young age and maybe even today at some points of your life, and then what you do to get out of it, because we talk a lot about the hurt and the pain, the identification, kind of like our meetings, but then we want to talk about how do we get out of that? I get in self-pity, it seems like a lot lately, and I'm trying to figure out how do I get unstuck? It's easy to keep going in the self-pity, the poor me, how could this happen to me? Why? And then, getting out of that, usually it's like, I got to get positive spiritual content in my life or find so much pain that I'm like, fuck, I surrender. Mm-hmm. Just like when we did with drugs and alcohol, like I surrender, I can't do it anymore. So talk a little bit about your story, and you can start anywhere you want, from a young age or high school or wherever you want to start.
Yeah, I think for me at a young age, what wasn't really processed because I was just a kid and thought it was like, my parents divorced when I was 7 years old. Now I was playing athletics and successful at athletics and just like so driven in my sports that I was kind of in my own lane. And, not till later after doing some deeper like medicine work, this is like a couple of years ago, did I really feel the impact of like what that divorce actually did, and saying, oh, my parents did the best they could, they made the best out of a bad situation, and they did, but that doesn't take away the trauma of like, having a mom around every single day. And especially because I'm a mama's boy, So I think, even though I had sports to just kind of like distract basically, I know that was something very significant that just got suppressed for many years. But in athletics, for me, it was so much around really caring what other people think. It was external validation. You play sports, it's performance driven, specifically baseball, it's statistics. Like you have to care what other people think. You have to care what the coach thinks, because he's going to be the one who decides if you're in the starting lineup. And then you play, and everything is like, your batting average is this, you have this amount of hits. Now scouts are coming to the games, and like, they're going to make the decision if they want you at their school or not. So everything was just so performance based for me. And a lot of that at a younger age, I got like, taken the Enneagram test, and I'm an achiever, and it's rooted in the validation and getting validation, like from my dad, and maybe not getting it. I mean, he did a great job raising us, but like, they're just dealing with the tools that they have. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think I would, if I didn't know my dad's state, like for me, it was just succeed in sports and get your validation there. So that kind of rooted the achiever personality type in me, or my ego basically. And, from there, it was just everything was rooted in caring what other people think, all the way until I played baseball until my senior year at Arizona State. And 15 games into my senior year, I had a massive traumatic surgery on my knee. It was my fifth surgery at the knee. And I remember waking up in that hospital bed that night. It was like, somehow I was like all alone. It was a dark room. I had a morphine drip that I could hit every 10 minutes. And I remember like every 8 minutes just sitting there, because I was really in a lot of pain. I mean, there was probably some addict behavior in that also, but I was fucked, man. I looked down on my leg, and from just the signs and scars of trauma to the unbearable pain, I'm like, I knew baseball was over for me. And that was like right when I woke up, I just had this knowing. And that was the catalyst for me that really rocketed me into my addiction, because all of a sudden you take away the one thing that I could get approval from and get validation from my whole life. And now that's gone. So that just kind of sent me into this, like, I don't know who I am. I was like all about baseball, and that was my identity, and I didn't have a plan B. And, so it got messy really quick. That is my core wound. And so when I, about 9 years later, after just off and on self-destructive, addictive behaviors, going into rehab and getting really curious, like, what the hell happened to my life? I was like this baseball player, and now I'm a drug addict. Where did it all go wrong? And it wasn't the emotion. It wasn't the physical pain. Like, yes, I had 80 Percocet a week prescribed to me. I had a massive surgery, cadaver transplant. But when I stopped blaming everybody else and the doctors that screwed me over, and my family that doesn't understand, and my friends that don't have my back, the core of it was I didn't want to feel the emotional pain of the loss of my identity. So it had nothing to do with physical. It was a perfect storm with the surgery that I had and getting over prescribed. But really, it was the emotional pain of the loss of the love of my life, the only thing I ever knew. And when that was stripped from me, it was like, it got messy.
Yeah. You didn't know who you were. And all of a sudden your new best friends are, drugs and maybe alcohol. Right. And it's like, they became your best friends because they probably created some relief for you and disassociating from reality. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to hang out with these two new friends.
Yeah. And then maybe there were some actual friends, but I mean, they were drug addicts like me. So, it's not like they were quality relationships, or we were having meaningful conversations like we get to have all day, every day today.
So we talk a lot on this podcast about relationships and how a lot of people in ACA and the laundry list listeners, how we kind of go all in. Like you mentioned, baseball was your identity. It was your whole life. A lot of times people on this podcast and people doing the work in ACA, they go all in a relationship, whether that's a relationship with a friend, a romantic relationship at work. They go all in to the point where if it doesn't go well, they get hurt, they become the victim, they fall down. And one of the traits that we heard on the laundry list is we will keep a relationship no matter what, because we don't want to feel the abandonment feelings that come with the loss of a relationship. So we will do anything. We'll accept bad behavior. We'll be abused. We could be the abuser. We don't like who we are. Whatever it is, like, we will not remove that relationship because, and it could be work, it could be romantic, it could be your parents, but you're unwilling to become your true self because you don't want to feel the feelings of ripping out that relationship. And I know you and I have gone through, I've gone through a divorce and you've gone through a breakup. And I know for me, it was incredibly painful, but it was also what led me to this program and to do the work I do now, which is try to help other men that there is hope. You don't have to stay in a relationship. There's plenty of, other women out there that can give you love and could make you feel safe. And don't stay in something if it doesn't feel right in your heart. And God will take care of you until you can take care of yourself. So if you want to talk a little bit about relationships and how that plays out.
Yeah, as you were reading that one on the laundry list, I mean, it just brought me back to my last relationship and how long it dragged out because of that exact reason. And I look back on it now and, I was more attached to one of our dogs than I was to actually her. I kind of knew that, but I got very clear after the fact once, did some work around that. But I think I was so in love and attached to this one dog. And I knew that this breakup was going to mean that most likely that dog was not going to be mine. And so I would say like at least probably a year of just maybe 2 years of a knowing like this shit's not going to work. But yet the fear of like the abandonment, losing her. But really, I mean, as I say that today, dude, it was the dog, man. I was so in love with this dog. And so I abandoned myself and just kind of rolled with things, tried to get things to work, tried to force things, tried to coach her, tried to change her. And it was like my coach would always say, stop trying to fix her and fix yourself, work on your own relationship skills. And that was like the best advice I could have heard. And then early on in the relationship, early on in the coaching I was going through at the time, she had me look at like, okay, let's look at the red flags that you chose to ignore in the beginning, and then you make the list and then you see like 7 years later, it's like, oh my God, those are all still there. So I think today, from a promises standpoint, it's, I tell people this, I'm in a super healthy relationship and so grateful now, but I tell people somehow like after I posted about my breakup because I post a lot of stuff socially on Instagram. And after I did that, I attracted all of these people, men and women that into the coaching program that I have that were stuck in a relationship, like maybe not the exact same scenario, but going through all those same fears of abandonment. Really just sometimes it's the uncertainty and the fear of change, which, the part of the brain that likes us to stay with what's familiar is just trying to keep us stuck, even if it is an unhealthy relationship. So it's like my teacher says, change is not part of the process. It is the process. And going back to my breakup and having a couple, like a decision, like we had an agreement with the dogs that wasn't upheld. And I ended up never seeing this dog that I love so much ever again. And so that in the beginning, because that wasn't the agreement initially, I was the victim. And for like a week and a half, I remember just saying like, I got fucked. What the fuck? This is so fucked. Like just like verbalizing it, saying it out loud multiple times a day. And I went and got more therapy, which was like so key for me. And my therapist was really able to paint a picture and help me get into my heart and understand that, she had been through a breakup. She had a dog taken from her, had a house taken from her. So all of her shit was coming up. All of that fear of what happened the first time was coming up, and she was going to do anything possible to not lose her dog again. Right. And so it really, for me, and she said, my therapist is like, this is an opportunity for you to offer unconditional love and forgiveness to her. And in doing so, you're breaking cycles, you're breaking generational cycles and past life stuff by you choosing love and forgiveness. And, she's like, well, her, on the other hand, like she's been through this. She knows what this feels like and she's doing it to you. And so most likely the cycle continues for her. Right. And like in that moment, I just had compassion for her, and what that resentment turned into. Like, she helped me. I live in San Diego now, and I was living in Arizona at the time. And there's ocean has always called my heart, but like, especially the last 7 years, we weren't going to be moving anywhere. And so I just came out here one weekend, and it was just so clear to me. He's like, I was just watching the sunset, and God was just speaking to me saying, you just got to make the move. And so I went back, and within 2 weeks I moved to San Diego, and it's been like the best decision other than getting sober I think I've ever made. Like, to have a fresh perspective and have the healing properties of the ocean around me, and just like not having to not having to bump into any of like the intertwined friends, the family. Like, I just got to be fresh here. So it turned in, she ended up giving me a gift. That's the moral of the story. That's the turnaround once I got out of victim mode.
Right. And like you said, like, I think everybody's right. She's right. You're right. There's no right or wrong. Everyone's just doing what they know have to do with this ego. I mean, we're all the same outside of the ego, right? When we die and we're born, we're all exactly the same, that light and divinity inside of us. But that ego, which is childhood stuff, maybe generational, maybe past lives, like the ego, it's amazing how what it'll do to protect. I think it's protecting itself. Really, it's not. It's hurting us, but it's protecting ourselves, which is living through fear. And nowadays, like, I mean, I got all worked up about a business thing yesterday, and I thought about it when I went to bed and prayed about it. And it's like, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They're not right, and I'm not wrong, and they're not wrong, and I'm not right. And we all have our perspective. And it says that in the laundry list. Like, it's easy for me to become the victim. It's easy for me to, think I'm getting screwed here. But when I take I'm not getting screwed, and what's my part in it? Well, my part is I decided to sign up for this relationship. And this particular one was business. And it's, this is just what comes with the territory. Not everything is peaches and roses. There's things that don't go your way. So I'm curious, because I'm a hero child too. And you mentioned you were the achiever, the hero child. And for me, what the hero child means is that as a kid, I searched high and far for approval at every turn, and whether that's sports, whether that's cleaning my room, whether it's like, look what I did, Mom, and look how bad my sister is, Mom, just making sure I got the shining glory and my sister or other people looked like they were doing a poor job, just so I got the attention. And that's a really sick way of living. And it just creates an incredible amount of pain inside of my soul and who I am. But today I still see it come out sometimes. And if my friends are doing really well, or someone's telling me, oh yeah, Todd, you're just not doing that great in business anymore. Everyone's passing you by. What happened? You're not that sharp anymore. You're getting older. You're not good looking. I mean, just on and on and on, just throwing a dagger into that hero child. How do you deal with that today? Because for me, it's about getting comfortable with myself. And they say the purpose of the Red Book, the ACA program, the purpose of it is to find a parent within inside of you to give you love and approval. So it's called reparenting instead of getting it from others. So I'm not getting it from my mom, my dad, my wife, my kids, my dog, anybody. Even though I feel love from all those people, I'm not getting that approval where my survival depends on it.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely me. And I think how that showed up, how it still shows up. But, I have a brother that's a year older than me in school, about 18 months older, very successful in sports, but not as successful as I was. And so there would always be like, I noticed this showing up as getting acknowledged for something, where that would make me feel uncomfortable, because if I was getting like my name in the newspaper or like some type of recognition, my brother would kind of let me know sometimes like, oh, you always get all the attention. You always get all the love. And so when it would happen, I would immediately think about him and like not want that acknowledgement to happen. So it will show up, even though like I am a Leo and there's part of Leo aspects where they like that center stage. The acknowledgement can be tricky sometimes. I mean, I've worked on it, and I give my coaching clients an exercise called getting in the practice of acknowledging. Like, we're terrible acknowledgers as it is. acknowledging each other, but definitely acknowledging ourselves and celebrating the wins that we're having. So I've had to do that work and really just be in the practice and try to like offer acknowledgement up all the time, because it feeds both parties. When somebody's getting acknowledged and then somebody's acknowledging, it's kind of like a win-win. But that's kind of the work that I had to do to really, if somebody is giving you a compliment, that you can look them in the eye and say, thank you, I received that, instead of like diminishing whatever the compliment might be.
I sometimes do that. Like I'll get a compliment and I'll be like, oh, no, I don't, that's not true. Or, and turn it around right away and give them a compliment, right? Instead of acknowledging it.
Yeah, we've had a guest on, Sylvester McNutt. He lives in Arizona. He's an amazing writer. He wrote a book called Love Yourself Properly. He's got a podcast. You'll see a lot of people repost his quotes on Instagram, but he lives in Arizona, and he told me a story of him. He just came off of speaking. He was speaking somewhere and dressed in this nice suit, and he was at Sprouts, and this old lady was like, excuse me. And he's kind of like not wanting to be bothered. And she said, excuse me. And he turns around and she says, that is such a beautiful suit. And then he immediately went into like, oh, I got it on sale. He started to diminish, and she looked at him and goes, shut up. And he's like taken back by it. She said, shut up. When somebody compliments you, you look them in the eye and you say, thank you. And so like,
it's amazing how hard that is sometimes.
So hard. We do some like stuff sometimes on my retreats where maybe at the end of the retreat, someone will stand up and share something bold, maybe a goal or her transformation, his or her transformation. And then at the end, we'll have everybody clap really loud, like a thunderous applause. And people just like, they want to sit down. They cross their arms. They like turn into a little kid because all of a sudden they're getting showered with acknowledgement, because it never happens.
It didn't happen as a kid, so it's uncomfortable as an adult.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Charles, I know you have a lot of questions for Donny. Why don't you...
There is a legend of Donny Starkins. Donny, I don't know if you know this, but your legend carries on to this day from the time that you spent early on in sober softball. Remember that time, 2006, 2005?
I miss those days.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'm sure you hit on that too when you're carrying your message as well, right? So Donny and I are both new in sobriety, and softball for me was the first time like I was part of a team. That was part of something. Like no one wanted me on the boyfriend team. No one wanted me on the family team. No one wanted me on the work team, right? And those were special moments. I was grateful to be able to participate with you, and I recall upon those very fondly. But Donny he was an animal. They still talk about you to this day. He's in the Sober Softball Hall of Fame. I mean, do you remember those days? It was fantastic, and those were early sobriety for you as well, correct? Right.
So key.
Yeah. Can you hit on that?
So
like
key.
As a guy that lived in baseball, and like you said, that was your life taken from you, and then you go down that path of drugs and alcohol, and then. Can you just talk significantly, and for anyone that's listening that's suffering from with addiction, being part of this recovery team, whether it's softball, bowling, there's all the sober people love
just going to coffee after the meeting.
Yeah, anything just to connect,
get there early and shake a few hands.
Yes, to find part that. So hit on that a little bit, because that was so instrumental to where I am today. And finding a home within sobriety was softball. Like there were times where I wanted to take that drink, but I knew I was going to let my team down on Sunday and had to be there for that and be there with you. It was a very special time. So let's hit on that first.
Thank you for that. I would say that was such an essential part. Thank God for that. At the time, and the men's meeting, the Saturday morning men's meeting that I went to, that my sponsor took me to, and we started getting a service commitment. We were just setting up the chairs and making some coffee, and that contribution, like feeling like I'm actually contributing something, that went so far. Like I had some type of purpose before that. I thought my purpose was this baseball player, and that didn't work out. Thinking that actually landed me in rehab. But to come out and have, like, for me specifically, men's meetings, and that Saturday morning meeting, and then play softball on Sundays, like the weekends. I would always look forward to the weekends more than I was partying. Yeah. And yeah, man, I just think, they say, I think it's Gabor Mate, the opposite of addiction is connection. But that for me, and then getting a little taste of it, just getting a little taste of playing ball and playing with the team again, that was like so fun and so essential, and really created the foundation for my sobriety moving forward.
Yeah, those are special days. Todd, we destroyed teams for the early on. I think at one point we won like 100 games in a row. Okay, so next thing that I like what you hit upon, and I'm sure that this is going to resonate with our listeners as well. The not being able to walk away from the relationship, more so because of the attachment of the dog. We focus a lot about the attachment with the individual, but I know personally there's people that don't want to lose the home that they're in, that don't want to lose the extravagant lifestyle or the Suns tickets.
The image. What is it going to look like in the community? You know,
the financial components of it, the emotional attachment with the dog. There's some form of abandonment that comes in, and it presents itself in many different forms. Another thing that you hit on that I liked was the familiarity thing, right? So I know when living in the laundry list as a human, I don't necessarily do what's right. I don't do what's wrong. I do what's familiar. And sometimes familiar is right, sometimes familiar is wrong. But I get this comfortability with what's familiar. And in some cases, familiar could be taking abuse from your spouse. Familiar could be, the dog. And it's amazing the power of that. I have the abandonment thing is probably the most powerful component of this and the way that it affects us, right? And speaking for me personally, there's even when I wanted to be done with a relationship. So it's me that wants to leave. And I finally make that and make that move and say, I'm done, I'm leaving. 6 hours later, while sitting in the hotel room, I'm like, what the hell have I done? What have I done? I'm an idiot. I'm feeling abandonment even when it's what I want.
And that creates more anxiety and fear and shame.
And then you come running back, and then how many times can you do that?
Right. Right. Oh, shit, I really fucked up. I better really, figure out how to get her back.
Forgetting all the cigarettes out in the face, forgetting all the different things. But, it's so, if you can hit on that just a little bit, where I like the familiarity part. I know that's probably something that you discuss a lot and how that impacts our decisions. Would love to hear that.
Yeah, I think it's because my coaching program is called The Shift, which I just love that word shift. It's just change. It's move energy. And so many people are stuck and they're stuck in something. They're stuck in a dead end job, or they're not in their purpose, or they're in an unhealthy relationship, or they're stuck in a habit or an addiction. And for so many people, I think there's just this driving fear of, it's really just uncertainty. That's the truth, I think, of most fears. It's just uncertainty. But like, what's really certain? I mean, did you guys think we would be, having a podcast, say, when we were in our addictions, talking about this right now? Like nothing is for certain. So I think it's, for me, these awareness practices, like I teach mindfulness and teach meditation. And I think for me, it's all about awareness, right? As you guys are reading these steps, the laundry list and the promises, the greatest gift I've been given from this work, starting in rehab, starting going through the 12 steps initially, was the gift of awareness. And just to notice, like, awareness is the first step in creating any kind of change. It's kind of like the first step in AA. You kind of have to know you have a problem and admit it, right? But then it's like, from there, then what? Awareness is one thing, but if you're not taking action on those things, and that's why, like, you have to have accountability, and men, like for me specifically, men in my corner that are going to shine the light of awareness on my blind spots, call me out on things, but also support me and love me if I'm struggling. I'm kind of going off a little bit, but I love the fact that you brought up safety. And I love the fact that three men can sit on here and talk about being safe in a relationship. I think for many men, they wouldn't even understand what that means. Like, but to feel emotionally safe in a relationship, or to not, it can be super damaging. And that's ultimately where we will tend to abandon ourselves, to not abandon, this idea of the relationship that, we thought we were going to have, but it's never like we think it's going to have, it's going to be ever.
And what does it feel like now to dedicate your life to a practice of helping others? Because it seems like, but the retreats and the coaching and the, meditation, the yoga, like the podcasts, like you're trying to share your experience, strength, and hope, and hopefully change the lives of others for the better. I mean, how does that feel?
it feels like the most selfish decision I've ever made in my life, but like a real healthy, selfish decision. The only way I'm out of these old patterns of selfishness and self-centeredness, which when I did my 4-step the first time, it just like screamed it. Like I can remember staring at it and just having this pounding headache and seeing a mirror of just how selfish and self-centered I was. So to create a life of service and be able to have some business around it, to me is like, it's the only way out, because I was so rooted in that selfishness and self-centeredness that selflessness is the antidote, right? I think today the saying is my selfishness is my selflessness. So it's like getting the greatest life hack ever that we got because of our terrible decisions in our addiction, which these programs have given us, which is the gift of service. It's like, what else is more important? And yeah, if you're in self-pity or if you're feeling, like shit, like just go help someone. You're not going to be thinking about yourself when you're in that pity. So
yeah,
I'm so grateful that
one rule right there has got me through the last 8 months. I mean, just go help somebody else.
Yeah.
You can get back to your pity potty and your self-pity when you're done, but just go help somebody, call somebody, go pick someone else, go show up in a meeting and talk to the newcomer. And it's amazing how that changes perspective.
Yeah, it's like when I think about it, it was like such a good move because I can still have this life of freedom, which is a very powerful word for me, because I'm sure it is for you too also, because of how like stuck I was and bound in my addiction. So today it's kind of like a little pattern interrupt. I'll ask myself sometimes when I'm maybe going through the motions or somebody's calling and bothering me because I'm watching a show, someone that needs some help. And I just say like, Donnie, how free do you want to be? And it brings me all the way back to that moment lying on my couch, like at my bottom. And it just brings me back to that. And I just want to be free. Like, I don't ever want to go back to that life. And if I know if I just keep showing up and serving, like it'll happen. But I think it can't happen unless we go all in on the first promise of ACA, which was the discover our real identities by loving and accepting ourselves. I think most addictions, they're rooted in not loving ourselves enough. So I love that is kind of number one right here, and figuring out what are the practices and what do we need to do every single day to love ourselves. And in doing so, everybody else wins.
There's a lot of shame in 12-step programs. I mean, I was in a meeting yesterday and I heard a guy, my name's whatever, Tony, and I'm the problem. Like, you're just telling yourself that you're a piece of shit, and I hear all the time, if I got what I deserved, I'd be dead. Like, I hear all these things in meetings. I'm like, I just am so aware of words these days, and what I say and what I hear and what I put in my content in my body is like everything. And I'm a miraculous, amazing, eternal being that is just full of life, even if I might have a bit of self-pity, that's part of the emotional experience, and I want to feel all of the emotions. I don't want to feel just happiness all the time. At the meeting last night, a couple guys went around and said, I'm feeling like a 3 right now, as far as happiness, a 1 to 10. And I'm like, I don't want to be a 3. I mean, I want to be like 8 or 9, there's no such thing as a 10 for me, but it's like, I want to feel all the emotions. I want to feel when I'm sad, feel it. Don't get out of it right away and go eat some ice cream or go, get your girl or whatever. It's like, I want to feel the sadness and understand why I'm sad, and then love myself to being out of sadness, Yeah,
agreed.
Donnie, we're coming up on the hour, but talk about your next retreat. Talk about your coaching. Where can people find you? We're coming up on our 50th episode, and I think we just crossed the 10,000 listeners, which, I have no idea, but I think I expected it to be like 8 listeners, So that's obviously amazing. This resonates with people, talking about the vulnerability and the relationship. So where can people find you? When's the next retreat? When am I going to see you again?
Yeah. So first, I'll acknowledge you guys back for what you're doing and carrying this message. It's the same message, Darren and I are choosing to carry, where, we need you out there. And the fact that it's really cool, right? You have this conversation and then you don't realize who it's reaching now, the beautiful thing with technology. So this message, specifically what you guys are choosing to carry, is like so important. And to see you guys still rocking it out. It's just so inspiring, man. But for me, so next retreat is Tulum. I have a wellness retreat in Tulum. That's November 11th through the 16th. These are like all levels. Anybody could join if you have an open mind and you're willing to do some work and move your body a little bit. That will be November 11th through the 16th. I have one in January. I do every year MLK weekend called Love Yourself. That's in Sedona. And then my coaching program is called The Shift. It's a 90-day transformation of the mind, body, soul. And we dive deep into a lot of the topics you guys are talking about here. So you can always find me there just on Instagram. It's just my name, Donny Starkins.
Excellent. And if people want to sign up for a coaching program, I mean, is it like you have to sign up for a year? Can you do like individual sessions? How does that work?
Yeah, I have both. I pretty much stick with I have a 90-day, which is a 12-week course, one-on-one sessions once a week. That's my main coaching program, just because you need the consistency, you need the accountability. I'll do the one-off coaching sessions, especially for like prior coaching clients that are revisiting things. But I think it's just like you want to be able to dive in and immerse yourself in the work. And if you're stuck, like nothing changes if nothing changes, right? And you can't do it alone. And that accountability is, as we know, like the more layers of accountability you have, the more likely you are to be successful at whatever you're trying to be successful at. But form your team.
Couldn't agree more. Accountability is what saved my life. That's for sure. No question.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Donny, for being on. Again, Donny Starkins, the Comeback Stories. And you can reach him on Instagram, Donny Starkins. And we will check back in with you in 6 months. And hopefully I'll get to see you on one of these retreats and then live in Southern Cal or in Phoenix.
Yeah, man. Love you both a lot. This has been great. I'm always down to chop it up anytime.
Excellent. Thanks, Donny. We love you. And we'll see you next week on The Laundry List. Please be nice to my friend, and we'll see you next week.